It starts with a kind of disbelief. The sort of disbelief that spreads across an arena when the audience realizes the fighter in front of them isn't just good, not just promising, but something altogether different. Before most fans even knew her name, before the martial arts community had time to brace itself, Mona Kimura stepped through the ropes with the quiet confidence of someone who already understood what she was capable of. There was nothing loud about her arrival, nothing theatrical. But the moment the bell rang, it became clear that appearances were about to deceive absolutely everyone. Her story didn't begin in kickboxing, though it seems almost destined that it would end there. Mona originally built her combat identity in boxing, carving out a foundation that made seasoned trainers raise their eyebrows. She had precision, she had timing, and above all, she had that unnerving sense of calm that only fighters with real instinct possess. It would have been easy for her to stay in boxing, to climb that ladder one careful step at a time. Instead, she walked away from the ring and stepped into a world that demanded more range, more versatility, more danger. Kickboxing is unforgiving, and transitions from pure punching to full weapon combat rarely go smoothly. But Mona wasn't like most fighters. She wasn't transitioning to add variety. She was transitioning to unlock something. Her kickboxing debut felt less like a beginning and more like an announcement. Across from her stood a fighter with experience, someone who had been tested, someone expected to roll over the newcomer the way veterans often do with debutantes, still adjusting to the speed of the game. On paper, Mona should have needed time to settle into the rhythm of kicks, time to understand distance, time to convert her boxing instincts into something broader. But the bell rang. She placed her feet, and suddenly all the theories about what she should or shouldn't need evaporated. The opening exchanges were a shock. Mona didn't feel out the distance cautiously or circle conservatively the way first-timers often do. She surged forward with sharp efficiency, slipping into range and firing perfectly balanced combinations. Commentators scrambled to keep up with what they were seeing. Her movements seemed far too polished, far too composed for someone standing in a professional kickboxing ring for the first time. The 1-2 landed with a crisp snap, her center of gravity never wavering, her posture unshaken. It wasn't just impressive, it was unsettling. Every punch looked like it belonged to someone who had been doing this for years. But as surprising as the hands were, they weren't the weapons that changed everything. That revelation came later. In the early part of the fight, her opponent attempted to slow her momentum with pressure, trying to force Mona to retreat, to break her rhythm. Instead, Mona did something counterintuitive for a debut fighter. She pushed back. Every time she was driven toward the ropes, she met force with force, standing her ground and reasserting control with precise counters. Her right hand began finding its target more cleanly, cracking to the guard and raising murmurs from the crowd. By 1 minute and 30 seconds into the opening round, the tide had shifted so drastically that even the commentators began to sound astonished. They expected signs of inexperience, hesitation, awkward footwork, delayed reactions, but Mona gave them none of it. And still, no one understood her real danger yet. When the first front kick landed, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't thrown with full power or intended to finish anything. It was a probing strike, the kind fighters use to measure distance, to signal their opponent that the legs exist. But the moment it extended long and sudden, slicing up the center line, the arena atmosphere changed. There was something different about the way she delivered it. An absence of tension, a fluidity that made the kick feel like it had been telegraphed by nothing. Standing ringside, analysts immediately recognized the quality. This wasn't the kind of front kick taught to beginners, where force comes from stiff limbs and brute effort. This was relaxed, coiled precision, the hallmark of someone who learned to strike not through strength but through natural mechanics. The more she kicked, the more obvious it became. These weren't merely kicks meant to score points or keep distance. They were straight, piston-like attacks that shot forward with frightening accuracy. When they landed, her opponent's head snapped back with a shock that suggested the impact was far greater than it appeared. Mona wasn't forcing anything. She was simply letting her leg extend, and the result was overwhelming. It starts with a kind of respond. pushing forward, disbelief that trying to smother the kicks before they built momentum. The audience realized the problem was in front of them Mona wasn't just relying on momentum, not just her strikes came from relaxation, something altogether different timing. Before most fans even knew her gaps opened, before the martial arts community watching someone read a rhythm. No one else could hear. Kimura stepped even the commentators began describing her kicks as someone who already understood. They stretched, they expanded. They arrived nothing faster loud about her, longer than expected. Nothing theatrical. It looked supernatural. But the moment the bell rang, as the round progressed, it became clear that appearances were about to deceive absolutely every step forward resulted in punishment. Her story didn't begin in front kicks to the chin, though it seems almost destined that it would end there. An occasional Mona originally built her combat identity in boxing. At one point, carving out a foundation that made seasoned trainers raise their eyebrows that the crowd jerked forward in their seats. Blood began to appear, and above all, the nose reddened. She had that unnerving sense of calm, a sense of inevitability hung in the air. Mona, it would have been easy for her to stay in boxing, almost to climb that ladder one careful step. There was no malice in her eyes. Instead, no reckless hunger away from her finish and stepped into a world like someone who had already visualized more range, more versatility before the fight had begun. Kickboxing, every motion fit into a structure, and transitions from pure punching to full weapon combat rarely. This was not the chaos of a debutante. But Mona wasn't like most fighters. This was the composure of a specialist. She wasn't transitioning to her opponent, realizing the danger. She was transitioning to attempted to attack the legs. Her kickboxing debut felt less like a beginning, hoping to break the smooth more like those terrifying straight kicks. Across from her stood a fighter with even this strategy failed. Someone who had been Mona simply shifted her Someone weight, expected a roll over the newcomer the way veterans or fired another front kick debutantes directly up still the middle. Adjusting to the commentators began speaking in tones of disbelief. Mona should have needed time. The time to settle into the rhythm was extraordinary. Time to understand the strike selection was unerringly her boxing instinct. The opponent was falling broader. And Mona hadn't even unveiled everything she placed her feet, because then came all the theories about what she should, the moment that would begin her reputation. The opening exchanges were a shock. Upward driving Mona didn't feel out the distance cautiously and snapped her opponent's head back violently. The way first-timers for a fraction of a second, she surged forward with sharp efficiency. The opponent wobbled, slipping into range, tried to recover perfectly balanced combinations. The referee stepped in. Commentators scrambled to keep up with what they were seeing. The noise, her movement seemed far too blurred into the background. Far too composed. What stood out was only one thing: in a professional kickboxing ring for the first time. The cute newcomer with a relaxed posture. The 1-2 landed with a crisp snap. Had just delivered a knockout with center gravity never wavering. Carried the destructive weight posture of someone often compared to Mike Tyson. It wasn't just impressive, but only from the waist down. It was unsettling. Fans love narratives, looked like and combat sports fans love meteoric rises. But as surprise wasn't just rising, they weren't the weapons that changed everything. Her second fight came later. Didn't slow the momentum. In the early part of the fight, instead, her opponent attempted to slow growing momentum with pressure. People had begun whispering about her leg power, to retreat, about the way her kicks didn't look like kicks. Instead, they looked like punches thrown by someone with heavyweight pressure. Except they came from a fighter whose every time she was driven toward the rope, unleashed. She met force. The nickname began forming, standing her ground. She hits like Tyson, and reasserting control with her legs counters. By her right hand began finding its target more cleanly. This would cracking to the guard and raising murmurs. The rule of three tend to expose 1 minute and 30 seconds into the opening round. Third fights, tide had normally collapsed so drastically. Third fights that even the commentators began to sound hesitation. Reveal whether signs of experience has finally come prepared. Awkward footwork. But Mona delayed reaction. Instead of shrinking under Mona pressure, gave them none of it. Embraced the violence that fans had begun. No one understood her real danger yet. From the opening bell, when the first front kick she attacked with ruthless clarity. It wasn't thrown with full power or intended to finish. Gone was a methodical. It was a probing strike. She pressed forward like a fighter used to measure distance, who had grown impatient to signal their opponent that the legs exist. Punches, the moment it extended long and kicks hammered the midsection, slicing up the center. The crowd responded with a mixture of atmosphere and discomfort. There was something different about the way she delivered it, but Mona's pressure suffocated every attempt to fluidity that made the kick feel like it had been telegraphed by nothing. Press people standing.